It happened on a Sunday. The kind of Sunday that pretends to be peaceful sunlight spilling lazily through the curtains, the smell of roasted meat in the air, laughter echoing down a hallway that never really belonged to me. Mom says it's a cheap knockoff. That tiny voice cut through the chatter like the crack of glass. My niece, 8 years old, a bow in her hair, the reflection of her mother's arrogance glittering behind innocent eyes, was holding my iPhone 17 Pro with both hands grinning as if she'd uncovered a secret. The room tilted. Everyone heard her. My brother chuckled, first his laughter smooth and practiced. "Don't worry," he said, spearing a piece of roast. "She can buy another 10. That's what she's for, right?" The table erupted. My family's laughter always came too easily when it wasn't their pain being served. Forks clinked, chairs scraped. The smell of lemon glaze grew suffocating. I sat there still, a statue carved from humiliation. "Hi, my name is Celine Marlowe. I'm 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet wallet of this family, the silent sponsor, the one who keeps the lights on and the secrets buried." My niece tilted the phone, pretending to inspect it. "It feels fake," she said, and then, because cruelty is a language children learn faster than kindness, she bent it. The sound was small but brutal. That clean, sharp snap of glass and metal folding under force. For a second, I didn't even breathe. The phone broke in two, and so did the last thread of restraint inside me. The laughter grew louder. "It's just a phone," my sister-in-law said, waving her manicured hand. "Relax, Celine. Kids these days." I picked up the pieces. Two fractured halves reflecting the chandelier above like broken mirrors. I remember thinking even light looks different once it's cracked. I slipped the shards into my bag like a coroner collecting remains. "Enjoy lunch," I murmured. My voice didn't shake. No one noticed how steady it was, that eerie calm that replaces tears when rage grows too quiet. That night, my apartment was still. The city outside hummed with life, but inside my walls, silence stood tall beside me. My desk lamp glowed over a stack of bills, tuition receipts, transfer confirmations, the invisible proof of every sacrifice I'd made for them. There it was near the bottom of the list: tuition, niece. I hovered the cursor over the line. One click, the $900 monthly payment vanished. Glass breaks, laughter fades, but silence cuts the deepest. That night, I didn't sleep. Sleep is mercy, and mercy had no place left in me. I sat by the window, the October air pressing cold against the glass, and watched the city breathe. My broken phone lay on the desk beside me, its screen catching the lamplight like ice. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a promise. The next morning, the first call came. "Celine." My brother's voice was brisk, confident, the tone of a man who never imagines he could lose control. "The school called. Payment bounced. Must be a mistake." I took a sip of coffee. "No mistake," I said. A pause. "What?" I ended it. Silence. Then the sound of air leaving his lungs. Ended. "What the hell are you talking about? That's her future." I thought of his daughter laughing as the phone snapped, of the table clapping along to my humiliation, of the endless years I'd paid for their comforts, their status, their smugness. "Her future," I said evenly, "is in her parents' hands now, not mine." The line went dead. The slam of the receiver echoed like thunder inside my chest. But instead of fear, I felt something else. A pulse. Power. By Sunday evening, the storm came to my door. My sister-in-law arrived uninvited. Her perfume entering the house before her voice did. "You're sick," she spat. "She's a child. You're ruining her life over a phone." I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm teaching consequences, something your household forgot existed." Her laugh was brittle. "We'll find another way. You think we need you?" Her words were knives, but her eyes told the truth: fear. For years, I'd been their quiet engine, the invisible current behind their lavish image, the private school, the designer bags, the vacations they bragged about. Without me, the facade cracked. "You've mistaken me for your safety net," I said softly. "That net just snapped." She slammed the doors so hard a frame rattled on the wall. But when the silence settled again, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like ownership. 3 days later, the ripples became waves. My niece's school sent an official letter: tuition terminated, enrollment suspended. It arrived at my brother's house like a verdict. By Wednesday, my phone buzzed again. Family lunch. Sunday, my mother texted. No emojis this time, no warmth, just a summons. They called it lunch. I knew it was an ambush. When I arrived, the laughter was gone. The air was heavy, thick, with something sourer than lemon roast shame mixed with pride. My brother spoke first. Celine, do you have any idea what you've done? You know how hard it is to get her into that academy? She'll lose her spot permanently. I said nothing. Silence has a way of stripping power from those who rely on noise. My sister-in-law leaned forward, voice honeyed but venomous. You've crossed the line this time. Parents talk. The board talks. Do you really want your niece treated like trash? I met her eyes. Funny, I said quietly. You didn't mind when she treated me like trash at this very table. The room froze. Even the chandelier seemed to stop swinging. My mother, ever the peacekeeper, finally spoke. Celine, sweetheart, she's just a child. We all overreacted. Be the bigger person. Reinstate the payments and we'll move on. Be the bigger person. The phrase tasted like rust. It was the anthem of my entire existence, me the one who swallowed hurt so others could stay comfortable. I looked up slowly. No. Just one word, but it split the air cleanly. My niece folded her arms. It's just school. Mom says we'll find another. Her tone, casual, dismissive, learned from years of watching adults escape consequences, lit a cold fire inside me. Then I said softly, let her find out what another really means. The silence that followed was the kind that makes people shift in their seats, reaching for excuses that won't come. I stood before dessert was served. 3 days later, the final letter arrived. Enrollment terminated permanently due to non-payment. I didn't have to see their faces. I could imagine it. The disbelief, the panic, the sudden awareness that the invisible foundation of their comfort had vanished. By that evening, my mother was at my door, cardigan clutched tight around her shoulders. Celine, she whispered, voice trembling, this is family. You don't turn your back on blood. Blood, I repeated, stepping aside so she could see the quiet order of my home. The bills paid, the air calm. You mean the blood that bled me dry? She flinched. Mom. I continued gently. I've paid nearly $50,000 over the years for her schooling. In return, I got laughter, mockery, disrespect. She's a child. She's a mirror, I said, a reflection of the adults around her. Her lips pressed together the way they always did when truth made her uncomfortable. That night, when the door closed behind her, I made tea and sat in the silence again. It no longer felt empty, it felt earned. The next morning, my brother called once more. His voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. You don't get it, Celine. People are talking. They think I can't provide. You're making me look weak. I stared out the window, watching the city glimmer in the distance. You did that yourself, I said. The day you laughed while your daughter broke what I worked for. Actions have consequences. Remember, there was nothing on the other end but breathing, then a hissed whisper. You'll regret this. But as the call ended, I smiled faintly. Regret was their language, not mine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family's safety net. I was the reckoning they never saw coming. By the end of that week, whispers had already reached every corner of our family circle. You can always tell when people are talking about you. It's in the pauses that stretch too long, the polite smiles that feel a little too tight. My mother's bridge club knew. My father's old colleagues knew. Even my aunt in Chicago, who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, texted, I heard there was trouble with your brother's family. Is it true? True. It was all true. Except none of them understood what it took for me to finally let it happen. For years, I'd carried that family's pride like a cross, the tuition, the private lessons, the summer trips. I had told myself it was out of love, out of duty. But looking back, it wasn't love. It was desperation, the kind that grows when you think affection has to be earned. Now that I had stopped paying, the illusion was breaking piece by piece. By Tuesday, my brother's wife called again. Not to apologize, that would have been too human. No, she called to negotiate. Celine, she began, voice brittle. This has gone far enough. You made your point. But you're ruining a child's future. Can't you just let it go? I almost laughed. You mean like you let my dignity go? Like you let your daughter humiliate me in front of everyone? She sighed dramatically. You're being emotional. That word again. Emotional. The label they'd used to dismiss me my entire life. When I cried, I was dramatic. When I disagreed, I was hysterical. When I finally said no, I was cruel. Maybe I am emotional, I said quietly, but at least I'm finally feeling something that's mine. The line went dead. I didn't cry after that call. I didn't even feel angry anymore. It was strange after decades of walking on eggshells, the silence of standing firm was louder than any argument I'd ever had. That evening, I received an unexpected email. It was from the school. Dear Ms. Marlowe, we're sorry to inform you that your niece's enrollment has been suspended indefinitely due to non-payment. We understand you were the primary account holder. Please confirm whether future payments will resume or be permanently discontinued. I hovered over the reply box for a long time. Then with slow, deliberate precision, I typed 2 words, permanently discontinued. And as soon as I hit send, I felt it, not joy, not triumph, but release. For years, I had given everything to a family that believed love could be bought, that money could substitute for respect. Ending that cycle didn't make me cruel, it made me whole. But peace never lasts long in a house built on pride. By Thursday, my brother came to my door in person. His knock was impatient, the kind that demanded obedience. When I opened the door, he looked different. Unshaven eyes bloodshot, the polished charm stripped away. You're enjoying this, aren't you? He spat. Watching us suffer. That's what you wanted all along. I folded my arms calm. What I wanted, I said evenly, was for you to treat me like family. What I got was humiliation at your table. So no, I'm not enjoying your suffering. I'm just done saving you from it. He laughed bitterly. You think you're some kind of hero now? You're just spiteful. Maybe, I said softly, but at least I'm honest about it. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. You've always been jealous. Admit it. You've never had a husband, a family, a kid. You wanted ours. The words hit like a slap, but not because they were true. They hit because they were the last weapon of a man who'd lost everything else. Projection. I smiled sadly. No, I said. I wanted respect. I wanted kindness. I wanted what you never learned to give. He stared at me, his jaw working, but no words came. He left without slamming the door this time, which almost hurt more. That night, I sat on my couch, hands trembling slightly. The conversation replayed in my mind like an old recording, scratchy, repetitive, impossible to turn off. Was I really becoming the villain they painted me to be? Had I gone too far? I opened my notebook, the one I'd used to track every payment I'd ever made for them. Tuition bills, mortgage deposits, page after page of numbers that spelled out my quiet servitude. $48, $320. That was the total. $48,000 for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. I closed the notebook and whispered to the quiet apartment no more. Days passed. The family group chat went dead. No messages, no updates, not even the usual birthday emojis. I knew what that meant. I had become the villain in their version of the story, the selfish sister, the cold aunt, the ungrateful daughter. But something unexpected happened the following week. One of my mother's friends, Mrs. Dalton, called me. She was one of the few women in that circle who ever treated me kindly. I heard what happened, she said softly. You're braver than they'll ever admit. It's not easy standing up to family, but sometimes silence is the loudest truth. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the warmth on my cheeks. Her words were simple, but they cracked something open. Maybe I wasn't the villain after all. Maybe I was just the only one brave enough to break the pattern. The next day, I went for a walk, something I hadn't done in months. The air was crisp, the kind that bites gently against your skin. The park near my building was full of people laughing, running, living. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt part of that world. For years, I'd been a ghost orbiting other people's lives, waiting to be seen. Now, for the first time, I was visible to myself. But peace has a strange way of testing you. Just as I began to believe I could move on, life decided to send one last reminder of who I used to be. On Saturday morning, I stopped by a small cafe downtown, a quiet place with soft music and the smell of cinnamon. I had just sat down when I heard a familiar voice behind me. It was my sister-in-law. She looked exhausted. The expensive glow she once wore had faded, replaced by the dull gray of sleepless nights. Her tone, though, was still sharp. So this is what you do now? Sit around drinking coffee while your niece cries every night. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. Maybe she's crying because she's realizing actions have consequences. She's a child, she snapped. And I was your family, I replied quietly. You didn't seem to care when she broke my phone and you all laughed. You taught her to see me as less. Now she's learning what that really means. Her eyes filled with tears, but not the kind born of remorse, the kind born of losing control. "You've destroyed us." "No," I said softly. "You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped funding the illusion." She opened her mouth to argue but stopped. Maybe because she saw something in my eyes she hadn't before, not anger, not hate, but finality. When she left, I sat there for a long time, letting the noise of the cafe fill the hollow spaces her absence left behind. And in that quiet, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about freeing yourself from the need to be understood by people who will never understand. That evening, as I walked home, I felt lighter. But beneath that calm was a flicker of unease, the sense that my family wasn't done yet. They'd lost control, lost money, lost face, but people like them never accept loss quietly, and I knew they were going to fight back. By Monday morning, the story they preferred, the one where I was the cold aunt who destroyed a child's future out of spite, had spread with the efficiency of smoke in a locked room. My mother's messages became clipped and formal, as if etiquette could make the narrative true. My brother's friends suddenly discovered their empathy for fathers under attack. My sister-in-law posted a photo of my niece's old academy blazer with a caption about resilience and moving forward from cruelty. No names, of course. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. It would have stung a year ago. It didn't now. What landed heavy and low was how predictable it all was, how quickly people who built their identity on approval tried to weaponize it when approval slipped away. The retaliation arrived in smaller, pettier ways first. My favorite cafe suddenly lost my standing order points. A neighbor, who used to borrow my ladder, avoided my eye in the hallway. A volunteer coordinator emailed to say they were reassessing the mentorship program I'd signed up for, citing concerns raised by a community member about your temperament with children. I read that line twice then, a third time my chest tightening, because there it was when money failed, they would reach for character. I could see the message thread in my head, someone hinting, someone posturing moral concern, someone offering a neat little anecdote about a Sunday lunch, and a broken phone twisted into a tale of my overreaction. They hadn't learned a single thing, they just switched weapons. I closed my laptop and forced myself to breathe. The temptation to respond, to explain, to correct, to beg strangers not to misfile me under danger rose like bile. But something steadier answered inside me. They don't get to teach you how to spend your name. I made tea the way I did when panic tried to claim my hands, and looked around my apartment. It was small and spare and honest. Nothing inside these walls was bought with borrowed respect. The quiet was still mine. By afternoon, another email arrived, this one from a bank I didn't use. Notification of change. Authorized contact added to your account. The account number was unfamiliar, the last 4 digits, pricking a memory I couldn't quite pull into focus. I called, gave the verification details, felt the old obedient rhythm take over my voice. The tone I used in every institution, so the person on the other end would believe I deserved help. The representative paused, then read the name of the authorized contact aloud. My brother. Then my sister-in-law. On a savings account opened 6 years ago with my name as primary and a mailing address that wasn't mine. A cold clinical part of my brain took the wheel. I asked for statements, I asked for the origination documents, I requested a hold, then a fraud review. When the PDFs landed in my inbox, my fingers went numb. The signature on the authorization form was mine. The neat practiced loops, the exact tilt of the S, the confident slash of the M. It was mine down to the pacing, and I had never signed that paper. I printed it. I set it beside the tuition ledger I'd kept for years, the careful columns of dates and amounts and receipts no one had ever asked to see, because no one had wanted to know the cost of their comfort. Side by side, the papers hummed with their own quiet electricity, the visible math of my giving and the invisible math of what they took. I don't know how long I sat at the table practicing my breath like a swimmer before a long, cold plunge. A thought arrived, uninvited and brilliant: check your credit. I pulled the report and watched the entries populate. There, lined up like a row of small betrayals, were inquiries I'd never authorized, and a loan I had never taken, an auto loan 4 years ago The balance now paid the borrower listed as Marlowe household with my social attached. My brother's SUV, the one he bragged about, the one he said he deserved after a hard year. The hard year I paid their mortgage top-up twice. I should have felt shock. I felt relief, like a light finally clicking on in a room I'd been stumbling through for years. The story I'd told myself was that I was complicit in my own erasure, that I kept agreeing to be small because the cost of being big would mean being alone. The truth was worse and cleaner. I hadn't just agreed. They had made me small on paper, too. When the doorbell rang that evening, I almost didn't answer. Then I saw who it was through the peephole. Mrs. Dalton, my mother's oldest friend, the one who had called me brave. She stood there in a raincoat, hair damp, clutching a small tin box like something you smuggle out of a war. I opened the door. She didn't sit. She pressed the box into my hands with a look that was almost apology. "I should have given this to you years ago," she said, voice a rough whisper. "Your grandmother left it with me." "Only to Celine," she said. "Only when she needs to remember who she is." My fingers shook because sometimes life is obvious in ways we hate it to be. The tin smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue, I found letters tied with ribbon, copies of bank passbooks, and a photocopy of my grandmother's will. The original terms I knew: small bequests to everyone, a modest educational fund for my descendants. But tucked behind that was a handwritten note in my grandmother's careful script, dated a month before she passed. "If they try to take what I left, it will be obvious," she'd written. "Celine, your kindness will be used like a faucet. Learn how to shut it off. The account at First Temperance is yours alone. If anyone presents anything else, it's forgery." There was an account number, a key taped to the page. My breath snagged. The bank name didn't even exist anymore. It had merged twice since. But accounts don't vanish. Only trailheads get renamed. I looked up at Mrs. Dalton, 1,000 questions charging the air between us. She only shook her head, eyes shining with a grief that wasn't about death. "You were always the one," she said, "even as a baby. You were the one they used, and the one who could end it." After she left, rain stitched the city into a soft gray veil. I sat with the tin box and the papers from my inbox, and felt something knot and loosen at the same time. Maybe this is how inheritance really works. Not money, not property, but warnings wrapped in love and the courage to believe them. The next morning, I walked into the bank that had swallowed First Temperance and its successor. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and resignation. The queue moved at the pace of bureaucracy. When it was my turn, I set the tin box on the counter and the copy of the will, and I asked for the legacy department. I expected suspicion. I got efficiency. An older woman with a tight bun and a tighter smile ushered me into a small office and asked me to tell her everything. I did. She listened without flinching, took notes, scanned the documents, placed a cautious call. When she hung up, her voice had softened. "The account still exists," she said. "Dormant, but intact. Your grandmother was very precise." She hesitated, then added, "We also show a recent inquiry attempt against that file by someone other than you. It was denied." Her eyes met mine. "You might consider speaking to counsel." The room tilted. Who, I asked, though I already knew. She couldn't say. Policy. But the rest of the day turned into a set of clean, necessary motions. I froze access to every account with my name on it. I filed a fraud alert. I changed passwords and set up two-factor verification on things I should have defended years ago. I called an attorney recommended by a friend of a friend, the kind of woman whose voice sounded like polished steel, and booked a consultation. Then I went home, placed the tin box on my table like an altar, and sat staring at it until the light shifted and the room became a long, patient shadow. My phone buzzed just before dusk, a message from my brother. Not rage this time. A meeting request. Mom's house. Tonight. We need to talk. The need sat there like a dare. A month ago I would have gone because I'd have mistaken their urgency for love. Now I went because I wanted the light on the lies, and I was done dragging lamps across their floors in secret. When I arrived, the house smelled like disinfectant and a failed attempt at comfort. The fancy china was gone from the shelves. A cheap tissue box stood where a decanter used to sit. My mother perched on the edge of the couch, rosary wound tight around her fingers. My sister-in-law's eyes were swollen, practiced tears. Yes, but edged with something real, this time fear that couldn't be posed. My brother paced phone in hand as if a solution might text him if he kept moving. He started the performance anyway. "This has gone too far," he said, not bothering with hello. "You froze accounts we rely on. You embarrassed us in the community. I set the printed authorization form on the coffee table. My signature, my counterfeit self, looked back at them. Beside it, I placed the credit report entries I'd highlighted, the auto loan that had worn my name like a mask. And finally, the copy of our grandmother's handwritten note with the account number and the taped key, her warning hovering on the page like a second presence in the room. No one spoke. The clock in the hallway ticked into the silence. "Tell me who signed my name," I said, voice low. Not a threat, a fact inviting its partner. My sister-in-law's breath snagged. My brother's eyes flicked to my mother, and something ugly and small darted across his face before he smoothed it away. My mother's fingers stilled on the rosary. For a long moment, I thought she might lie the way she always had. Pretty, dignified, plausible. Then something in her collapsed. She pressed the heels of her hands to her eyes hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "It was me," she whispered. "I told him it was only for the enrollment paperwork. I told him it would make things easier that you'd agree if I asked. Then when the car—" her voice cracked. "I didn't think it would matter. You always rescued us." The words didn't explode. They landed. Soft. Final. The kind of confession that doesn't ask for absolution because it doesn't understand its own weight. I sat down so I wouldn't sway. I remembered her voice at a different table a lifetime ago. Be the bigger person. I remembered every time I'd translated their need into my duty. I remembered the broken phone, the laughter, the word cheap in my niece's mouth like a hand-me-down. "You forged me," I said. Not loud. Just true. And you taught her to laugh while you did it. My brother bristled. She was trying to help the family. We're family, Celine. I actually smiled. It was small and it was mine. "Family is a promise," I said. "You turned it into paperwork." For once, no one had a comeback. Pride doesn't know what to do with proof. I gathered the papers, slid them back into my bag, and stood. My mother reached out, fingertips trembling. "Celine, please," she said, and there it was, the plea that had always worked because it sounded like love. But I could finally hear the missing verb. Please continue. Please continue paying. Please continue hiding. Please continue being the net under our fall. "No," I said gently, "the net is gone. The fall is yours." On my way out, I paused in the hallway where the family photos still hung, graduations and holidays, and the staged grins of people who wanted the frame more than the moment. I found myself in each picture at the edges, shoulder half-cut, eyes watching the center. It hit me clear and unsentimental. I had always been the margin in their story. And I was finished being cropped. When I stepped into the night, the air had that bruised, tender chill that follows a storm. I drove home with the window cracked, rain scent threading through the car, my grandmother's note on the passenger seat like a passenger itself. At a red light, I glanced down and touched the taped key. I didn't need what it opened to hurt them. I needed it to finish saving myself. Back in my apartment, I placed the key in a small dish by the door and turned off every light except the one over the table. I sat, palms flat, breath even. Their fight would get uglier now that the truth was named. There would be more whispers, more small punishments from small people who mistook me for the easiest target. But paper doesn't lie once it's read, and neither do women who have finally learned how to carry their own names. When I woke the next morning, I expected the usual ache, the invisible bruise that follows every confrontation, but there was only stillness. The city outside my window was rinsed clean from the night's rain, every streetlight reflected in puddles like tiny lanterns. I made coffee slowly, watching the steam rise, and for the first time in months, the sound of the kettle didn't echo against dread. They hadn't called, not my brother, not my mother. Silence again, but this time it wasn't weaponized. It was surrender. I spent the day sorting through old files. There were decades of receipts, Tuition statements, loan transfers, proof of a woman who believed love was measured in invoices paid on time. I threw most of them away. Paper forgiveness, I called it. Every sheet that hit the trash felt like reclaiming a breath I hadn't taken since I was 22. Around dusk, my doorbell rang. I almost ignored it, but something in the rhythm, two quick knocks, one long, made me pause. When I opened the door, my mother stood there holding a small grocery bag. She looked older, smaller, her lipstick uneven. For a second, I saw the version of her I'd always wanted, human, not heroic. "I brought dinner," she said. Her voice was brittle, like she'd rehearsed it on the drive over. We ate quietly at my table, roasted chicken from the store, nothing homemade. She picked at hers. Halfway through, she sighed and said, "When you were little, you never asked for anything. That scared me more than if you'd screamed." "I learned early," I said. "In this family, quiet keeps you alive." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I thought I was protecting you. When your father left, She stopped. I didn't know how to be soft and survive at the same time. I wanted to stay angry. Anger was armor. Forgiveness felt like walking barefoot on glass. But watching her struggle with the truth was like watching an old house sag under its own roof. She wasn't a villain. She was a woman taught that control looked like care. "Mom," I said finally, "you forged my name." Her shoulders shook. "I know. I was wrong. I thought if I kept things running, no one would notice how broken we were." For years, I'd prayed for those words. Hearing them now didn't fix anything. It just made the silence between us less sharp. I poured her tea. We sat there, two women linked by blood and bruised by the same family story, each trying to forgive a version of the other that no longer existed. When she left, she kissed my forehead, something she hadn't done since I was a teenager. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "you have your grandmother's hands." I didn't know what she meant until she was gone. My hands were steady veins like fine blue threads, the same shape I remembered clasped around a teacup decades ago, the hands of a woman who'd hidden a key and a warning for me. The next day, I met with the attorney, her office lined with law books and quiet confidence. She read every document, every forged signature, every banknote. When she looked up, her gaze was direct. "You could press charges," she said. "Forgery, identity misuse. There's a clear case." My stomach turned. The words "press charges" sounded sterile, procedural, nothing like the living, complicated ache of family. If I did, I asked, what happens to them? They'd lose what's left of their accounts. Possibly probation. Public record. She paused. "And what happens to you is you stop being their scapegoat." I sat there, the hum of the fluorescent light filling the pause. Justice and Mercy stood on opposite ends of the desk, waiting for me to choose. "I don't want revenge," I said quietly. "I just want it to stop." "Then we stop it," she replied, and slid a release form toward me. "File this fraud protection order. It freezes every joint access they ever created. They'll know they can't touch you again." Her certainty was clean mathematical. I signed. That night, as the city lights flickered outside my window, I realized I didn't need a courtroom to win. I'd already broken the cycle by refusing to hide the truth. That was enough. Days drifted into weeks. I went back to work, met deadlines, started sleeping through the night. The world didn't crumble without their approval. It expanded. I bought fresh flowers every Sunday, sunflowers loud and unapologetic. Their brightness felt like defiance. Sometimes guilt still visited, a quiet ghost that sat at the edge of my bed whispering, "You ended them." When it came, I answered honestly, no. I ended me pretending to save them. One evening, I opened the tin box again. The key caught the lamplight, and for a moment, I saw my grandmother's face in memory, the faint smile she wore when she taught me to thread a needle. I realized the key had never been about money. It was about trust. She had trusted that one day I would know when to stop giving. I visited the bank again the next morning, not to withdraw anything but to ask what the account contained. The manager smiled. "It's modest," she said. "Enough to start something new." I left it untouched. Maybe one day I'd use it to build something that wasn't built on obligation. A week later, a letter arrived from my niece. The handwriting was careful, uncertain. "Aunt Celine," it read. "Mom says I shouldn't write, but I wanted to. I miss you. I didn't know the phone was expensive. I'm sorry I hurt you." I sat very still. The apology of a child carried more truth than all the words her parents had spent their lives avoiding. I wrote back simply, "Thank you. Mistakes teach us who we are. I love you anyway." Maybe she'd never get to read it, maybe her mother would intercept it, but writing it felt like planting something in good soil. When the holidays came, I didn't join their dinner. I cooked for myself: rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes, a bottle of red wine I didn't have to share. I lit one candle for the girl I used to be and another for the woman I was becoming. Somewhere around midnight, my phone buzzed. A single message from my brother: "Mom's moving in with us. She's sick. You should visit before it's too late." I stared at the screen. Guilt reached for me again, claws familiar, sharp. But I remembered her words at my kitchen table: "I didn't know how to be soft and survive." Maybe softness wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the last, hardest form of strength. I went the next morning. The house smelled like disinfectant and wilted flowers. My mother lay propped against pillows, thinner, paler. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "I almost didn't," I admitted. She laughed softly, the sound fragile. "Always honest. That's your curse and your gift." We didn't talk about the documents or the forged signature. We talked about small things: the weather, my work, the flowers on the bedside table. When I left, she squeezed my hand. "Don't let them turn you into me," she whispered. "Promise me that." "I promise," I said. Outside, the air was cold but kind. The sky was washed in pale gold, the kind of light that forgives everything for a few seconds before the day begins. That night, I stood by my window again, looking at the city. Somewhere out there, my brother was still angry, my sister-in-law still defensive, my niece still learning. The story of our family would never be perfect, but maybe for once it would be honest. I picked up the tin box one last time and placed it in my closet. I didn't need the key anymore. I had unlocked myself. Grief doesn't announce itself. It seeps in quietly, disguised as calm. The morning after my mother's death, I woke to the sound of rain. Not the dramatic kind that lashes against glass, but a soft drizzle, steady and unrelenting, the kind of rain that cleans without asking permission. The house was silent, heavy with the residue of words never spoken. My brother had called at dawn. His voice was small, almost hollow. "She's gone," he said. Just like that. No tremor, no pause. As if he was still performing strength. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the gray light filtering through the curtains. I thought I'd cry for her, for the years we lost, for the love we never quite got right. But the tears didn't come. Instead, a strange peace settled over me, like a sigh finally released after holding it for decades. I dressed simply: black sweater, slacks, hair pulled back, and drove to the old family house. The same house where laughter used to echo and later turned into silence sharp enough to cut. When I arrived, everything felt smaller. The living room, where I'd once felt invisible, was now just four walls and old furniture. The framed photos still hung in their perfect rows, each one a curated lie of a happy family. But now I didn't feel anger looking at them, just understanding. My brother stood by the window, his suit wrinkled, eyes red from exhaustion, not grief. My sister-in-law hovered near him, quiet for once. When he turned to face me, something in his expression broke: pride maybe, or denial. "She wanted to see you again," he said, voice rough. "I know," I whispered. "She kept that tin box you had," he added. Said it reminded her that someone in this family still had a conscience. That caught me off guard. I hadn't realized she'd understood, that she knew what that box had meant to me. That maybe in her final days she'd found her own kind of redemption. "I'm sorry," my brother said suddenly. The words fell awkwardly, as if his mouth wasn't used to forming them. "For everything. For the loan, the signatures, the way we treated you. I thought I was protecting what was ours, but I was just stealing from what was yours." He looked at me, then really looked, maybe for the first time since we were children. His eyes were wet, but not from performance this time. He looked human and small and frightened. I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness isn't a word. It's a choice you have to feel fit into your chest. "I forgive you," I said finally. "But not because you deserve it. Because I need peace." He nodded slowly, like someone who'd expected a verdict but got a mirror instead. The funeral was simple. Rain fell throughout, washing the marble stones until they shone like glass. I stood beside my niece, now older, quieter. She clutched my hand without looking up, And for the first time, I felt something pure between us. Not guilt, not obligation, but connection. When the service ended, my sister-in-law approached me. Her face was pale, her mascara smudged, but her tone was different, stripped of pretense. She talked about you a lot before the end, she said softly. Said you were the only one who ever did what she couldn't tell the truth. That night I drove back to my apartment, the city lights blurry through the rain. I left my phone on the table and stood by the window, watching headlights streak across wet asphalt. The world moved on as it always does, indifferent but alive. And for the first time in my life I felt free. Free from expectation, free from apology, free from carrying everyone else's sins as if they were proof of my worth. I didn't become a saint. I didn't suddenly erase the pain, but I stopped letting it define me. Weeks later, I received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was the tin box. My mother must have sent it before she passed. This time there was something new inside, a folded note in her handwriting. Celine, I finally learned what love looks like. It isn't sacrifice. It's honesty. You were right all along. I hope one day you'll use that key not to open what I left, but to start what's yours. I sat with the letter for a long time. The words blurred in places where her pen had paused, maybe mid-tear. I pressed the paper to my heart and whispered, I already did, Mom. That weekend, I visited the bank one last time. I closed the dormant account not out of anger, but completion. Then I walked to the park across the street, where the air smelled like wet earth and lilacs. I sat on a bench and watched people pass, couples holding hands, children chasing pigeons, a man jogging with a dog that refused to keep pace. Life in its ordinary beauty kept happening. I opened my phone, a new one gleaming and whole, and took a photo of the park. Then I typed the caption, "Sometimes you have to lose your family to find your peace." I didn't post it anywhere. It wasn't for them. It was for me. In the months that followed, I rebuilt quietly. I started a financial consulting firm for women trying to untangle themselves from toxic families or manipulative marriages, women like me, who had confused debt for devotion. I called it Marlowe and Light after my grandmother. Every time a client cried in my office because she'd finally learned to say no, I felt something unclench in my chest. Healing, I realized, isn't loud. It's steady, like a heart remembering its rhythm after too many pauses. One day my niece came to visit. She was taller now, her confidence softened by experience. She brought flowers, sunflowers, just like the ones I used to buy for myself. Aunt Celine, she said, I got a scholarship. I'm going to study law. I want to help people who get taken advantage of. I smiled. Sounds like someone I know. She grinned. Yeah, someone strong. That night after she left, I looked around my apartment, the bookshelves, the quiet plants, the sunlight spilling over the floor, and thought about how peace had once felt unreachable. Now it was a presence that lived in every corner. I picked up my camera and recorded something not for anyone else but for me. The lens focused on my face, calm and centered. I spoke softly as if to an invisible listener. When I was younger, I said I thought revenge would feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like closing a door that should have never been left open. But peace feels like breathing after years of drowning. If you've ever been told you're too emotional, too giving, too much, remember this. They only say that to people whose hearts they can't control. I paused, exhaled slowly. Family doesn't always mean love. Sometimes family is the lesson. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is walk away and let karma finish the story for you. I reached out, stopped the recording, and smiled. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me and the thousands of people out there who might hear my voice one day and recognize their own reflection in it. I uploaded the video later that night, not to stir drama, but to close a circle. When the first comments came in from strangers who wrote, "I needed this," or "You told my story," I felt my grandmother's voice inside me again whispering, "Now you remember who you are." If you're watching this, maybe you've been where I was, silenced, used, overlooked. Maybe you've mistaken survival for love. But trust me, the day you stop apologizing for existing is the day you start living. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it made you breathe a little deeper, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell me your story in the comments. I read them all, and I promise you're not alone. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting what broke you. It means learning to build again, stronger, softer, and on your own terms.